Let's go. So, one of the things that I'm passionate about, besides cooking great meals, is this concept called the mystical experience. And for years, I've been working on bridging the science with the mysticism, the science with the spiritual aspect, and combining different principles so that, number one, people can have an experience that we can reproduce it, to create a roadmap where people know where they're going, and then give some basic understandings that we have the biological machinery in place that just has to be activated so a person can actually begin to understand the mystery of the self. Because one of the biggest lies we've been ever told is that we're linear beings living a linear life. We're not. We're dimensional beings living a dimensional life, and we just happen to be keeping all of our awareness on our bodies, all of our attention and awareness on everything in our environment, and all of our attention on linear time. And when you do that, you have to play by the laws of Newtonian physics in space and time. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that there's more to reality. In fact, science says that we perceive less than 1% of reality. So we're missing out on a lot. So to go back to the story, I was writing an article on the pineal gland. And the pineal gland has, as I say in the book, metabolites of melatonin. Melatonin is the nighttime neurotransmitter that's made from serotonin in the pineal gland. And melatonin is what puts us to sleep at night. It what causes us to dream, causes us to repair, causes us to heal, helps us to metabolize. It causes us to relax. But when melatonin gets an upgrade, because a person begins to experience a greater frequency, it turns into some very powerful metabolites. So I was writing an article about it, and I was just in my innocent state, sitting on the couch, and my kids were asleep. I had finished the day. I was thinking about all the things I had to do tomorrow, and I kind of made a list in my mind, and I just needed a minute to relax. And I just kind of laid back on the couch. I had a fire going, and it was quiet. I kind of gazing into the fire, and I was getting kind of moving into a trance. And I just said to myself, talking to the pineal gland, where are you anyway? And with my mind, I kind of searched in my brain to try to figure out where I was. I could find it with becoming aware of it. And it was like I locked into something. The moment I locked into where the pineal gland was, in 1 second, I saw an image of this knob with its mouth open, releasing this white milky substance. And then in a flash, I saw a timepiece, like a pocket watch, but big and very, very, very lucid. And I saw the hands started moving backwards in time. And the moment I had this lucid experience, when I saw the timepiece, I understood that the pineal gland acts as like a timepiece that causes us to slip into different times and spaces. I don't know how else to say it except that I knew it. Yeah. And then the timepiece went backwards, and it went to a time when I was a 7-year-old kid. I was living on the East Coast with, our family was living there, and I was having a fever. And the moment I saw the scene, I remembered it, what was happening. And I had a fever, and my mother had just left the room, and I put the covers right up to my nose like this, right under my eyes. And I would do it every time I had a fever because I loved fevers. When I got fevers, I would always have very weird, mystical dreams.
You're probably I read that and I just laughed. I thought, this is probably Dr. Joe's the only person I've ever met that actually loves having fevers since he has a mystical experience.
And somehow I would just go into this altered state. So yeah. I'm witnessing this 7-year-old kid kind of unfolding into this mystical realm. And I'm asking in a very intuitive way a question about the way reality is. And I have no idea as a 7-year-old how I knew to ask that question. But when I saw myself as a 7-year-old asking that question, I fell in love with that kid. Like, wow. And then I was seeing how I was looking at reality as like checkerboard squares, each having a different dimension or a different, expression, but it's more like looking in the two mirrors that are side by side in a bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
It's infinite. It was kind of like I was unraveling that idea of dimensions as a 7-year-old kid during a fever. And I just thought, wow, I'm impressed. Wow. I didn't remember consciously doing that until I witnessed the scene. And when I fell in love with this little guy, I realized that the future me, called Joe Dispenza, living in the Pacific Northwest, was falling in love with the kid, and it was the future me that was drawing him to me. And that I was asking the same questions as an adult that I was asking then, and it was all happening in the present moment. And it's a very abstract concept.
So the question that you were asking about the nature of reality at age 7, you are now asking at a later age in the Pacific Northwest, and it was like these two time periods just collided together. Same question.
They were actually happening in the same time. Okay. There was no separation between my past and that moment. I recognized that all reality was happening in the same moment. I don't know how else to say that reality is kind of stacked on top of each other. The reason we see it as past and future is because we're conditioned into very linear time. But in the quantum field, there is no separation of time. So everything's happening in the present moment. So I was asking that same question as an adult, and I witnessed that I was doing the same thing as I was when I was young, and it was happening. There was a simultaneity that took place that I just understood. And then the timepiece moved forward. I saw the timepiece again move forward. And then there I am walking through my backyard as a future self of me, but an upgraded version of me, like more enlightened, more loving, more energy, more clear, more alive. And it was a winter night in the Pacific Northwest. I was barefoot, and I was walking on the grass. You know, the Pacific Northwest, when the grass gets cold and it's white.
Yeah.
I was walking across the grass barefoot with a kind of a cape on, but I was so in love with the cold that I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't contracting from it. It all felt good. I don't know how else to say it. It was life, and I was engaged, and I wasn't cold. It was just an experience. And I had walked across these basalt stones, and I was just so passionate and so filled with life. And I was walking past the fountain, and all of a sudden this very tiny little beautiful woman dressed in white comes out from behind the fountain. And I look at her, and she looks at me, and all of a sudden she sends me this amazing amount of love right in my heart. And I was thinking in the moment before that I was so filled with love, and the next moment she looks at me and elevates love, more love within me. And I remember thinking, my God, there's more love to feel than this.
Wow.
And in one instant, I remembered why I was there. And I looked towards the window, and then there's me, who was washing dishes a few minutes before, sitting on the couch. And I could see him in the window, and I was in the backyard.
Wow.
And I was my future self, and I'm washing dishes. And all of a sudden I look at that guy, and I fall in love with him, because I see his challenges. I see how he loves the dovetail concepts. I see his sincerity, and I see certain things about his future. Because I'm him. I'm God. And I fall in love with him. And the moment I fall in love with him, as I'm washing dishes an hour before I sit on the couch, I remember having this funny feeling that someone's in the backyard. And I see myself in the window lean forward to look through the glass, because there was a light behind me that was causing a reflection in the glass, and I couldn't see the outside. So I kind of leaned forward to see if there was someone outside, because I had this feeling someone was out there.
Wow.
It was just because my upgraded version of me was loving me, and I felt some feeling of love, and I was wondering where it came from. And I thought maybe someone was outside. So I had this moment where the pineal gland, the experience of the pineal gland showed me that we can move through times and spaces, and we can experience relevant moments that are connected to our present moment. And so that started me on the journey of dissecting and understanding how physics of the quantum and dimensions begins to work with our biology in the pineal gland, and what is the system that takes that experience and makes it into vivid imagery. And so I write about that in the book.
Okay, it's kind of like the loving version of Ebenezer Scrooge. You know how he goes to see his like former self, and he kind of sees himself throughout the whole time period. And so what you realize, and what is so amazing, and you talk about this in the book, is how many minutes had passed as you went through and saw your old, your 7-year-old self, and then yourself, washing dishes. How many minutes had occurred on actual chronological time?
Oh, not more than just a few minutes.
And that's the thing that's just, but of course, if there is no time, then of course, why wouldn't it take, a few seconds to go through all of this?
Well, time is a fascinating concept, and I start out talking about it in Becoming Supernatural. But we only experience time when there's a separation between 2 points of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So I'm here in my present body, and then there's somebody over there, and I experience separation from them because they're material and I'm material, and my senses tell me that I'm here and they're there. Mm-hmm. There's me in the present moment, and then there's my future and my dreams. And that future seems separate from me because I experience time as linear. Here's one point of consciousness, I'm sitting here, and then there's the toilet in the other room, or the kitchen in the other room, and that's another point of consciousness. So the moment I become aware that I want to go to the kitchen and to the refrigerator, I have a separation between 2 points of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So that when I drag my body through space and go from one point of consciousness to another point of consciousness, we experience time in a linear way. Mm-hmm. So we've just been conditioned to believe that time is linear because we believe that we're bodies living in space and time. Mm-hmm. But in the quantum, that's not how it is at all. The quantum is the unified field. In the unified field, there is no separation. Everything is connected in a realm beyond space and time. So in that realm, there is no separation, so you have an infinite amount of time. And if you have an infinite amount of time, then you have a lot of things you can do in all the time you need in the world. So you have an infinite number of possibilities that exist in the eternal present moment. And all of a sudden, then time is inversed. In other words, you experience, when you move through time, you experience spaces or dimensions.
Right.
So the only way you move through time is not from moving faster from one point of consciousness to another, like moving your body. It turns into be frequencies. So as you change your frequency, you've changed your vibration. All frequency carries information, and all of a sudden you're experiencing another dimension, another reality, another possibility. And there just happens to be infinite number of those. In quantum physics, it's called the many worlds theory. Mm-hmm. There's just infinite possibilities. So I've done my best in being able to describe the distinction between space and time and space.
Okay, when did this event occur? The one with when you asked, what is the pineal gland? And then you went through this. When was that? I
bet about 8 or 10 years ago.
Wow, okay. And so what began your journey of investigating, like, what the heck? I know that, like, what made you think, I mean, first of all, it's a phenomenal experience. I would want to know more. How did you start looking at what was happening to explain it on a scientific basis?
Well, I started to ask the question, if I'm having a very profound mystical experience. Now, I'm not talking about having a dream. I'm talking about having a full-on sensory experience without your senses. Mm-hmm. So imagine if your senses were heightened right now by 25%. Everything you were seeing, everything you were hearing, everything you were smelling, tasting, and feeling. If your senses are heightened, your awareness of where you are is also heightened. Yes or no?
Yes.
And consciousness is awareness. So when there's a change in awareness, there's a change in consciousness. And you can't have consciousness without energy. So all of a sudden, the brain starts processing greater frequencies and greater energy. And so you're having that mystical moment. What is the biological system that's taking information from the field that's not coming from your memory bank?
Right.
What is it that's transducing, taking information and turning it into such vivid imagery?
Right.
And so I started researching the pineal gland as that little kind of
But
biological
was
system.
it because you were asking what is the pineal gland that was what led you to that? Because there's lots of spiritual practices or lots of different practices that focus on your heart or your diet, like there's all different types of spaces. Why the pineal gland? Why did you focus there?
Just because I had read an article probably a couple years before that just kind of caused me to wonder about it, and ran into a researcher, a biophysicist, friend of mine, and I was a editorial advisor for a magazine, scientific magazine, and he said, "Oh, you should check out this one researcher." So I checked out this researcher, and he was one of the few rigorous researchers that had done such extensive work on the pineal gland. Now, every one of those centers in our body are centers of information. When you focus on your heart, you're going to feel gratitude and love, and your energy is going to expand, and you're going to be more selfless, and there's a whole consciousness that goes along with it. But as you climb up the body and you get to the pineal gland kind of caught my attention because there were so many weird things about it that I wanted to be able to piece together. So turns out that the pineal gland acts kind of like a cosmic antenna that allows us to tune in to different frequencies. And the pineal gland has tiny little crystals in it that are calcium carbonate crystals. They call them calcite crystals that are stacked up on top of each other. And I found an article after that experience that said that the pineal gland was a neuroendocrine transducer with piezoelectric effects. Now, most people would just go like, forget that. But yeah. I knew that piezoelectric meant taking one form of energy and turning it into another form of energy. So when the crystals of the pineal gland are compressed, the compression of the crystals takes a mechanical stress and turns it into an electrical charge. And so the pineal gland all of a sudden becomes activated. That electrical charge begins to produce a resonant electromagnetic field. So I was like, okay, so how do you compress the crystals of the pineal gland? And there are certain yoga breaths in yoga that I learned that I kind of modified and created that allow us to begin to inhale and pull this energy, this fluid up our spine, and then squeeze our intrinsic muscles and just hold it for a period of time, begins to push that cerebral spinal fluid up into the brain, and the pineal gland sits right at the back of the third ventricle. And the compression of the crystals, by holding your breath and squeezing, begins to activate the gland. So when the gland gets activated, all of a sudden energy from the lower centers, from the body, begins to be released into the brain. And the brain goes into gamma brainwave patterns, a super aroused state. Now, in the last 5 years, I've been doing extensive scientific research, as you know, in our advanced workshops. We've done 19 advanced workshops, and we have probably close to 10,000 brain scans.
Wow.
And I now know that when that energy starts to move, when the person's doing this properly, the imagery that we see is the pineal gland and the surrounding area is very, very active, a lot of energy there. And the energy is not coming from something outside, like through the senses. The arousal that's created is coming from the body. There's a release of energy from the body to the brain, and the entire limbic brain is on fire. Once the brain goes on fire, then the brain goes into high gamma brainwave patterns, and the person literally is super conscious. So we've actually proven at this point that this is the system that takes place, and this is the system that becomes activated when done properly. And the person then has a profound subjective experience that we could say, oh, that's probably very real, because they can't make their brain do that.
Right.
Now, the amount of energy that we've captured in the brain in our research is over 200 times normal. You never even see it in clinical studies.
Right.
There's so much energy in the brain that 99.7% of the population fallen 3 standard deviations above normal or 3 standard deviations below normal. It's a bell curve. And that makes up almost 100% of the population. Imagine we're capturing 200 and 300 standard deviations above normal. So we're talking about an enormous amount of energy. So my hypothesis then of the pineal gland, we've actually proven to be true. And so I show certain brain scans in the book to show exactly what happens. So then it's a neuroendocrine transducer. And a transducer is what takes one form of energy and translates it into another form of communication, like our Skype call here.
Right.
We're picking up the computer's picking up a frequency and turning it into a picture. Your television antenna picks up a wave from the environment and turns it into a very coherent picture. Well, the pineal gland acts as a transducer, and it picks up information from the realm beyond space and time, and that imagery then is transduced into very powerful pictures. And it's the metabolites of the pineal gland that create such a profound inner vision. That's why it's called the third eye. You're having an inner vision, and that inner vision is blowing your mind because it's way bigger than anything you've ever experienced and more real than anything you've ever experienced in your past external environment. And since experience enriches the brain, and it does, and since experience produces a profound emotion, right in that moment, that person's creating a long-term memory. And they're firing their brain, and they're sending a new emotional, chemical, energetic signal to their body. And we could say in 1 second, the past is being washed away. And when they come back to their senses, now they have more circuits in their brain in place, and it seems like some veil, some conditioning about our limitation is removed, and we see a broader spectrum of reality, because now we have the circuits in place to perceive what's always been there, but we didn't have the wiring in our brain to perceive it, because we don't perceive things how they are, we perceive things how we are. So the brain gets a neurological and biological, and the body gets a neurochemical genetic upgrade. It makes sense then that you're going to see more of reality the way it is.
Okay, so let me map this back to your story. You're sitting on your couch, you're like looking into the fire, you're getting into a trance state. You're not necessarily doing the breathing to like have the synovial fluid. None of that stuff was happening. But somehow you're able, and for people who are not familiar with the pineal gland, it's the intersection of this, is this right? An intersection of the intersection of these two lines. How would you describe where it is?
It's like between the back of your throat and the back of your head. It's back here.
Oh.
It's back there.
Okay.
The pituitary is more right here.
Okay, that's pituitary. So this is the pineal gland. Okay. Wait, I didn't even know. I don't know what I've been activating, Dr. Cho. But you're saying it's like right here, right? Okay, yeah. So back. Okay, so you're sitting on the couch, and so basically what's happening is you're able to. So I'm mapping this with the thing that you just said. So all of a sudden you have a little radar beep, or eep, wherever it is, pop up, and then all of a sudden it's receiving images. Is that what's working? So it's receiving images of you as a younger child, of you as a future version. It's all.
No, it's not images. The brain is taking frequency.
Okay.
Or like there's radio waves, there's Wi-Fi waves, or television waves in our environment.
Right.
And there's different antennas that pick up different frequencies that turn that into sound or music or to pictures or whatever, into information. So all frequency carries information. So the brain and the pineal gland are picking up the frequency, and then the pineal gland is working with other systems to transduce it into imagery in the frontal lobe.
Okay.
Let's just complete that understanding. So when you wake up in the morning and you perceive light, the moment you perceive visible light, right? And your eye is picking up that frequency, that optic nerve sends a signal to the pineal gland, and the pineal gland makes serotonin. When there's an inhibition of light or a loss of light, now serotonins turn into melatonin. So melatonin puts our body to rest. We start to dream a little bit more. We start to relax a little bit more. And brainwaves start to change. So imagine now, your pineal gland doesn't need to pick up frequencies through the eye, through visible light. Visible light is just one small spectrum. When you start tuning into faster frequencies that are faster than light, and Einstein said, the ceiling of three-dimensional reality is the speed of light. Anything that travels faster than the speed of light is going to turn into energy. So it means then, the moment you start tuning into frequencies beyond light, now all of a sudden the pineal gland is not picking up the frequency through the eye, but it's picking it up through its antenna. It's going to then translate a faster frequency than light into chemistry that is going to fit into the same receptor sites as melatonin, but melatonin is going to have a very powerful upgrade. So now you're going to see, when you dream, you're going to really dream. It's going to be in technicolor.
So that's how come, like, when you're describing in your vision, is that you actually, when you walked in the future, you're walking on the grass and could literally feel the cold grass, right? So it's like this. So it's going back to what you're saying. It's not just the vision of seeing you in washing the dishes. It was the whole five sensory perception that was being received by this transducer.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so melatonin, then you just don't dream. It's creating a very profound vision. You're not just relaxing. You make a benzodiazepine, which is an upgraded version of melatonin. Now you have a Valium chemical that really cools off the survival centers. You don't just heal. You have antioxidants that really heal. You don't just get it. Your body just doesn't relax. You produce the same chemicals that hibernating animals create. You really relax. Yeah. And now all of a sudden you don't even know you have a body any longer, because you feel like you're somewhere else.
Yeah.
So all the biological systems, CJ, are in place, and when they're switched on, wow, the person says I was there, or the person says I'm just not this person. I live in many dimensions. I now know that.
Mm-hmm. So if you go beyond the third dimension, the three dimensions that we're familiar with, what dimension, you describe it as consciousness, or what is it, the dimension, or is it just an infinite dimension? What is it that we're going to when you're going into and the transducer's up and you're picking up past life images, future versions of yourself? Where is it that you're going?
Actually, you're not going anywhere.
Okay, what's happening to what's happening to you? Or
right,
I don't even know what the right word is.
You take a point. You drag a point, you create a line. Mm-hmm. That's one dimension. You take a line, you drag a line, you create a plane. Mm-hmm. That's two dimensions. You take a plane, you drag it again, out, now you create a cube. Now you have three dimensions. Mm-hmm. So everything in our physical reality is three-dimensional, and we experience it with our senses. You gotta touch it, you gotta see it, you gotta smell it, you gotta feel it, you gotta taste it. Our senses plug us into reality. Excuse me. So the fourth dimension is time. And when we start moving through time, now we all of a sudden add another dimension to our three-dimensional reality. What exists beyond the fourth dimension is the fifth dimension, where all of a sudden you have so much time, you have more time than you have space. So you have the eternal present moment. And if you have an eternal present moment, you have an infinite amount of time. In three-dimensional reality, you have an infinite amount of space. Space goes on forever. And we experience time as we move through space. In the fifth dimension, sixth dimension, and on, imagine there's infinite dimensions. You have an infinite amount of time. And you experience spaces as you move through time. So there's dimensions, there's planes, there's infinite possibilities in the eternal present moment. So that's going from the Newtonian world to the quantum world. That's going from the world of matter and objects and people and bodies and things and places to the realm of energy and frequency and information and consciousness that has nothing to do with anything material. It's the immaterial place. And you can't go there with your senses. You can only go there as a consciousness, only as an awareness. So we've been working for years with our students to teach them how to get beyond their bodies, to get beyond the people in their life that they associate with, to get beyond the things they own, the places they live, the places they go, and even time itself. And when you go from a somebody to a nobody, from a someone to a no one, from something to nothing, from somewhere to nowhere, from sometime to no time, it just means you're taking your attention off of all those things. And when you do, you become pure consciousness. Now you are no longer playing by the rules of Newtonian physics. So then if you teach a student then that they're on the bridge of the quantum, they're on the nexus, that the quantum field is the unified field that governs all the laws of nature, and if they can begin to tune into frequencies with their awareness and they can unfold deeper into it, they'll become more unified and more whole. So they'll experience the consciousness of everyone, everybody, everything, everywhere, and every time. Isn't that the quantum field? So all of a sudden they have a greater sense of who they really are, and what we really are is one. We're oneness. And so one moment of that, our students sometimes slip into this place where they totally connect to that field, and literally in 1 second their disease goes away. Literally they get an upgrade, because all the biological systems now are processing more oneness and more wholeness and a greater. And as you get closer and closer to the unified field, now you have less separation between 2 points of consciousness. And if you have less separation between 2 points of consciousness, you're experiencing more oneness and wholeness, more love. It means then the more whole you feel and the less separation between 2 points of consciousness, the less time it takes to happen in your life. So we're students have instantaneous healings in their meditation. I mean, hearing coming back, skin conditions they've had since childhood. I mean, the next day it's gone. The pain in their body completely gone, because now they've interacted with the field. And if all disease is a lowering of frequency in the body and an incoherent message, all of a sudden now they're super coherent. And their body now gets a raise in energy because they've just connected to the field. And we're able to reproduce this experience more and more. And our brain scans show that, wow, we have people that can do it on command now, and we have more and more students with the same brain patterns. So we're starting to look at something called a law. You know, if something happens once, it's an incident. Right. But after twice, it's a coincidence. It starts happening 3 and 4 and 5 and 10 times. Now you're looking at a pattern, a trend. It means it's science, right? Yeah. So as I have experienced the meditation, you're pulling the energy up, and then you're actually tracking. You have, and I actually had this thing. It's connected to my brains, measuring, as I understand, the energy, my brain waves, energy in my brain. So you can actually choreograph what was happening in that meditation, and then at the moment, my brain kind of goes into these 200 to 300 standard deviations beyond what is in the normal bell curve range. That's how you know something is happening, because you're seeing the meditation, you're seeing what's happening in the process, and then you can see their brain just completely, I don't know, lit up, or what, I don't know what word you described. Exactly. So the brain goes into a super aroused state. Now, the brain normally goes into an aroused state when you're under stress, when you're angry, when you're fearful, when you're frustrated, when you're depressed, when you're guilty. That's when the brain becomes aroused. Where the survival systems switch on. But gamma is a faster frequency than beta brainwave patterns when you are aroused. Now, gamma is you're super aroused, but you're not doing it because of stress. Sympathetic nervous system switches on when you're under stress, mobilizes energy. But when this happens, the sympathetic nervous system switches on, and it releases energy back to the brain, and the brain goes into those high gamma brainwave patterns. And we know the person's having a mystical moment. We know that. And as a matter of fact, we can predict it now. We can actually start looking at the brain's patterns and say, oh, she's going to pop in a second. And the neuroscientists that come and study our work say, what do you mean she's going to pop? We say, just watch. And when they see these abnormal brainwave patterns, they're thinking she's having a seizure, because you never see that much energy in the brain unless the person's having a seizure. And yet the person doesn't look like they're having a seizure at all. They're wearing a heart rate monitor, and their heart is in super coherence. Their brain is in super coherence, and they're just feeling whole, way more whole than they've ever felt in their life. And they're feeling so whole and so in love with life that it's impossible for them to want. They can't wait. How could you want when you're whole? You feel like you have everything already. And that's when the magic starts to happen.
Right, because then they can let go at that moment. They can let go of their who they were and their identity, and just
And
so
there's no separation. They're no longer in lack.
yeah. So you had said in the book, and then you just said that you are able to train people to just go into that moment, and I assume the reason why you were just looking at the fire and that happened to you is that you'd gone through hitting that moment so many times. So is it like any kind of thing, practicing the scales, practicing yoga poses, that if you continually practice going to this place, that you can reproduce it?
Sure, it's just like anything else. I mean, we've labored really hard to get our people, our students, our community to regulate elevated emotional states, and we work with the Heart Math Institute, and we've got our students being able to sustain heart coherence for 45 minutes or an hour at a time. That means that they have such an incredible feeling of gratitude or love that they can do it on command. It's a skill or a habit. But that's one biological system. This is another biological system that you could get good at doing. We just did an advanced follow-up in Cabo San Lucas. We finished yesterday. And yeah, there are people in that audience that have made scientific history. And I could call them on the stage and say, we're going to hook your brain up to a brainwave monitor here, an EEG, and I want you to go in the high gamma. And they'll say, okay, give me 5 minutes or give me 10 minutes. And they'll do it.
Wow.
They know. Yeah.
Wow. So they're able to tap into consciousness. And once someone goes, so after you've experienced this, and I was so moved because the last time you came in Seattle, you said, you reach a stage and you think, this is amazing. And then you reach, and then you're like, and it just keeps on getting better. Like you feel like you've hit a high, and then it just keeps on getting higher and higher. So as you've gone through this process yourself, and and have you can probably reach this point of, if I said Dr. Joe go into gamma, you're probably doing it right now for all I know. but what is your personal experience has you've traveled this journey yourself and gone into these higher states of consciousness? How's your life different?
Well, on many levels. I mean, I think we're just conditioned to create based on lack. I see something that I don't have and I want it. And if I don't have it, I experience separation, then I go after it and I get it. And that's just normal in the way we live in 3 dimensions. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I just have much less lack. I feel more complete and more whole. I'm less likely to force outcomes or control outcomes in my life. I don't take things as seriously as I used to because I've experienced other aspects of myself that are real. I think I'm less seduced by so many things that seduce people to create separation. You can see a greater meaning behind things. I think for the most part, my values have changed. My values about life and my values about community and people and who we really are and why we're here, I think have changed dramatically just because every time I have a mystical experience, and I mean every time, first thing I think when I come back to my Joe Dispenza identity is, wow, you got this all wrong, dude. You got it all wrong. It's not you've been thinking it at all. You get a little glimpse, and there was some conditioning, some veils, some filters removed, and you see things a little differently. And to me, I think that's how we journey back to source. I think it's how we journey back home. It's just having those greater and greater moments in consciousness that literally changes our energy. And so I don't really want anything material anymore. It doesn't matter to me. What I really want is those moments, and I live for them.
What are your values now? What would you say your core values are now?
Well, my values really have to do with connecting and with people and with my message and transforming individuals and transforming cultures and recording it and demystifying the process so that people have within their reach all the tools to live a better life.
Yeah, so it's getting the word out there. It's just as much as you can to get the word out there.
Actually, I'd probably rather say it more like, it's not like I have to get the word out there. I think the word is out there. I think what was more important is that this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. What I want to do is demystify the process, make it so simple because we've measured it so many times that I could teach it better and say it easier and more simple. Get a community of people that can do it consistently, like the 4-minute mile, so that once that's broken, everybody can pierce that layer. And then set up the conditions in the environment to give people the proper instruction so they can apply that knowledge. I'm more about the application. I think that information now is out there and nobody needs to hear it any longer. They just need the experience. And so my workshops and what I talk about in the book is really all about having people experience the truth of that philosophy. And it takes experience to do that. So I go through countless measures to be able to give people enough opportunities to experience it. I mean, we just finished our retreat, as I said yesterday, in Cabo for our advanced students, and I pushed them way outside of where they normally go. And many of those people broke through, and they had profound mystical experiences. They didn't like me in the beginning for doing it.
How are you pushing them, Dr. Joe?
I'm pushing them past where they normally would stop. I'm setting up the conditions in their environment for them to go further than where they normally go. And that's how self-love is really born. When you get beyond your known self and you don't think you can go any further, and you call up this energy, this will, this passion, this spark, and that spirit waking up. And boy, they really transformed in a short amount of time. So I think for me, it's really about giving people the opportunity to experience it.
So where do you want to go next? I'm always excited because I know there's always an answer. And it's always extraordinary, the kind of stuff that you're doing. So what can we expect in the future? What are you kind of looking at now that kind of has sparked your curiosity?
Well, we started measuring telomere lengths in our last advanced workshop. And telomeres are the shoestrings that are on the end of DNA that really tell us our true chronological and biological age. So I was interested in taking a group of students and seeing if they could lengthen their telomeres. And if they could, they would be reversing their age. And so we're doing a telomere project right now. And it's really cool because the scientists that I talked to initially were saying, I don't think that's going to work. And then I said, well, okay, typically things take place in time. Telomeres are like fingernails. They're like hair. They grow over time. And I said, but that's linear. I said, what if a person is having a spontaneous remission in 1 second? Would there be a length in their telomeres? Because they're not experiencing it in three-dimensional reality. They're experiencing it in no time. And if it's no time, it's quantum. And the researchers were on the phone for like a minute. They didn't say a word. And they were like, you know what, you're right. That's absolutely possible. So I want to push the envelope to see if it's possible to reverse aging and lengthen telomeres. We've already proven that you can change gene regulation in 4 days. So I guess the next thing for me is just telomeres.
And the gene regulation is through the saliva. Like, what is it, the research that you did on that?
So we did 7,500 different gene regulations on students to determine if in 4 days they were able to upregulate, signal new genes to make new proteins. And again, a lot of the scientists said, it's not going to happen in 4 days. And I said, what if our students are living 4 lifetimes in 4 days? He said, what do you mean? I said, we're going to have them thinking differently, making different choices, doing different things, creating new experiences and feeling new emotions. And he said, well, let's try it. So we did salivary samples, and we did a random study on 35 people, randomly selected. And it was amazing because we had 8 common genes. Now they had upregulated individually their own specific ones, but we had 8 genes in common amongst our community that were activated in 4 days. One that suppresses cancer cells and tumor growth.
Wow.
One that stimulates stem cells to go to damaged areas and repair damaged tissue. another one for oxidative stress, to reduce aging and oxidative stress, to strengthen the immune system, to activate the skeletal structures of the cell called the microtubules that are responsible for picking up frequency and consciousness. So just in 4 days, we were able to do.
So out of in 4 days, you took these 75 people, and you were able to see that these or 7 or 8 things were actually changed with all 75 people.
Yeah, no, we took 35 people.
Okay,
We
sorry.
checked 7,500 different gene expressions.
Okay,
And
got it.
out the 8, we found out what we were looking to see, what common ones
Changed
were
in all the
active.
35.
Out of 35 people, we had 8 ones that were all uncommon, but we had individual ones that were unique to them that were upregulated as well. But we were just looking for the 8 common ones.